My name is Isabella, and I've been married to Sebastian for 5 years. We live in a peaceful town in Southern California, where his family owns a considerable amount of property and holds significant influence in the area. While they're not part of the ultra-wealthy elite, with numerous local businesses under their control, their voice carries weight in the community. Sebastian's family has always placed high expectations on me, especially his mother, Vanessa, who constantly imposed her opinions and controlled everything within the family. From the very moment I stepped into this family, it was silently understood that my role was to be a housewife, fully dedicated to caring for my husband and children, and always knowing my place. For 5 years, I've done my best to fulfill that role, managing the household, preparing family gatherings, never once complaining. And yet, I've always carried personal aspirations within me. I didn't want to live forever within the mold they had created. Everything seemed to begin the moment I set foot in Sebastian's family home, where every corner and wall echoed with power and long-standing traditions. From the very beginning, I realized I had entered a different world, a realm of social rituals, where every decision, big or small, was dictated by outdated customs and a proud heritage. Sebastian's family, with their undeniable influence in Southern California, had built a reputation that commanded respect from all. At the heart of it all stood Vanessa, Sebastian's mother, a woman not only known for her sharp intellect, but also for controlling the family's fate like a general on a battlefield. I still vividly remember those grand dinner gatherings at the house, where the soft lighting reflected off Vanessa's stern face. Seated at the center of the long, antique dining table, she resembled a resolute commander. Her cold gaze swept over each family member, missing nothing, not a single misstep or expression, as if assessing our every move. In that space, whenever her eyes landed on me, I felt the unspoken warning. Every action of yours must align with the model wife image this family has upheld for generations. Remember, a model wife must sacrifice everything for the family, Vanessa declared. Her voice echoed with gravity, not as advice or gentle suggestion, but as an indisputable command from fate itself. Each of her criticisms felt like sharp blades, slicing through even the smallest glimmers of hope within me. Despite all my efforts to fulfill the role of a housewife, from meticulously tending to every corner of the house to organizing lavish family gatherings, according to her, I was never good enough. "Why haven't you been able to arrange everything just as I expected?" she snapped, her voice filled with disappointment. Family meals weren't just times of reunion. They became stages for Vanessa to display her power and assert absolute control. "Don't ruin this family's image," she muttered, her eyes confronting me as if calling out sins I wasn't even aware of. Every criticism, every stern glance from her made me feel as though I was being eroded from within, as if the person I once dreamed of becoming was being crushed under a mold I never chose. The atmosphere in that room was so suffocating that every passing second felt burdened with blame. "If you can't maintain the image of a self-sacrificing wife, then what can you possibly do?" Vanessa asked, her voice soaked in contempt and disappointment. I could only remain silent, trying to hide the tears of pain and yearning for freedom that welled up in my eyes, longing for a life lived on my own terms. In those moments, beneath the glittering lights and piercing words, I felt like I was being reshaped from the inside out. The image of an independent woman was slowly vanishing, replaced by that of a weak wife, submissive under the weight of tradition. It was a feeling of being suffocated, of being judged without mercy, making me wonder, in this oppressive atmosphere, was there any room for personal dreams, for someone who wanted to define her worth in her own way? In that cozy yet pressure-laden space, I gradually realized that even though I had always followed the rules imposed upon me deep inside, I was quietly nurturing dreams, yearning for freedom and the chance to affirm my true self. Each time I silently met Vanessa's stern gaze, I couldn't help but wonder, was the price of such sacrifice so steep that it required giving up a part of who I truly was? Through those moments, I slowly came to understand that in order to survive in a world where power and tradition were held above all else, I would need the strength to seek out a purpose that belonged solely to me, a life that reflected the person I truly was. Still, within my heart burned an unyielding fire, a fierce dream that would not allow me to abandon my identity or my thirst for freedom. Throughout the many years I lived as a housewife, in the shadows of countless long, dim evenings, I quietly nurtured my own ambitions, like a small flickering flame in the midst of an oppressive night. I used to lie awake at night, lost in thought, wondering whether, beyond the rigid mold imposed on me, there existed another version of myself, a true version, quietly waiting to emerge and fully shine. Those questions became a whispered melody in the night, each inner inquiry igniting an even deeper desire to be free, to live as my authentic self. Then, as if fate had finally heard my call, an opportunity arrived like an unexpected breeze on a stifling summer day. It wasn't just a sign or a minor turning point. It was a door opening onto a new life, where long restrained dreams suddenly burst into flame, revealing the strength and vitality of my spirit. That opportunity, like a ray of light piercing through the gloomy clouds of tradition, rekindled my belief that I wasn't born solely to sacrifice for a family legacy, but that I too had the right to dream and to shine brilliantly on my own path. A prestigious financial corporation in Los Angeles, renowned for its outstanding achievements, unexpectedly offered me a position as director. It was an incredible opportunity that opened the door to a new future. It wasn't merely a job. It was living proof of all those silent years I had spent pouring myself into learning, striving, and overcoming obstacles to rise on my own. I dedicated a part of my life to nurturing the dream of affirming myself through my career, a dream expressed through a senior position, one that came with the recognition and compensation I had always quietly longed for. And now, that dream stood before me, real and radiant. When I received the offer, it felt as though a new life had been breathed into me. It gleamed like sunlight after a torrential storm. In that moment, I imagined myself standing above the clouds, where all the prejudice, all the chains of a powerful family, faded into vague shadows behind me. That was the moment I realized I no longer had to live under the weight of outdated rules. I could finally stand tall on my own 2 feet. But when I shared the good news, I never expected that behind the promises of support and companionship from my husband lay a reaction so cold and unyielding. Sebastian, the man I once believed would always stand by me, delivered his response with a chilling firmness. With a steady, emotionless face, he spoke softly but resolutely. My income is already enough. You don't need to do this. Those words exploded like firecrackers in the air, slicing through the space around me. The atmosphere grew heavy, and each word from him felt like a final judgment, severing all remaining threads of hope. Not only my husband, but even his mother, Vanessa, whom I had once respected and viewed as a model figure, didn't hesitate to express her brutal disapproval. Her voice cut sharp like a blade as she emphasized that my acceptance of the new job would not only damage the family's reputation, but also prove that I had lost my way, that I had completely strayed from the ideal wife image she had spent years upholding. Her words were drenched in deep disappointment and dissatisfaction, making me feel as though I were being condemned, that every effort, every cherished dream I had silently held was dismissed in a single blink. That night, as darkness fell, the air inside our home, already somber, grew so tense it felt suffocating. The whole family gathered in the large living room, where dim lights cast shadows on everyone's faces, turning them into ghostly figures of the past. I still remember those moments clearly, as if each second had been seared into my memory with terrifying clarity that would never fade. Vanessa, her eyes unable to conceal the deep disappointment and the patience that had clearly run out, spoke sharply. A decent wife would never put herself above her family. You should think about the family. That sentence echoed endlessly, like a haunting refrain, hammering in the idea that my new job, something she considered shameful and inappropriate, would tarnish the family's honor and damage its reputation. Soon after, Sebastian's voice joined hers, echoing his mother's approval, declaring that my decision had nothing to do with personal fulfillment, but was a threat to the greater good of the family. In that moment, every word from Vanessa was not merely a judgment on my career choice. It struck like thunderbolts to the soul, denying the very essence of the person I had carefully nurtured within myself. I felt the coldness, the cruelty, and the harshness in Sebastian's words, as if he had long since accepted his role under the rigid standards imposed by his mother. His statements exploded with finality, shattering the dreams and sacrifices I had delicately built over time. That feeling made my heart feel like it was breaking into pieces. All the trust, the longing, and the efforts I had poured in seemed suddenly hollow, dissolving into the icy air of betrayal. He was no longer the understanding partner I once believed in, but a willing accomplice to the deeply rooted family values, where my personal happiness was always deemed secondary to the proud image and power of their lineage. "I've tried to preserve the family's tradition," he said, his voice heavy and unyielding, words that felt irreversible, spoken as if to declare that any emotion or desire I had must surrender to the family's code of respect. His words weren't just a rejection of my decision. They were a cold proclamation that my individual happiness must give way to the reputation and prestige of a dynasty refined over generations. In his eyes, I saw not love, but disdain, indifference, and a deep-rooted belief in the rigid expectations passed down by his family. Every reaction, every emotionless remark from him seemed aimed at maintaining the fortress of their reputation and power, never once acknowledging the emotional agony of the wife he deemed only worthy if she conformed to a mold cast long ago. I stood there, composed on the outside but burning with disappointment and silent rage within. Sebastian's words didn't just paralyze my longing for freedom. They forced me to confront the painful question. Was there truly any place in this world where a woman could be more than just a victim of outdated expectations, where she could define her worth freely and fully? In my mind, the image of a wife would forever be shaped by invisible standards, while I, someone who dared to dream and hold on to something greater, now faced utter rejection and contempt. A tidal wave of disappointment rose in me, as Sebastian's justifications echoed like the declarations of someone who had long abandoned hope for love and understanding. I felt as if all my sacrifices, all my efforts, had become meaningless, as if I were nothing more than clay, soft and passive, waiting to be molded by a family that never saw me as my own person. It was in that moment that I faced the bitter truth. No one, not even the man I once trusted and loved, had the heart to give me their belief, to make me feel respected. In the damp shadows of that room, beneath the dim light, the sound of sarcastic chuckles and bitter remarks echoed like a never-ending chorus. I felt as though I had been stripped of my chance to shine, as if all the dreams and desires I had to affirm myself had suddenly become worthless. Every word, every cold glance, felt like a dagger to the heart, forcing me to question whether all my efforts and sacrifices over the years were merely childish illusions in the face of deeply entrenched prejudice. In that moment, I realized that no matter how hard I tried, my personal freedom would always be betrayed, slowly drowned by rules and values I had never chosen for myself. After that suffocating family meeting, where the air was thick with criticism and rigid beliefs, I felt my heart shattering into tiny fragments. Sebastian's words, interwoven with the ruthless cruelty of Vanessa, struck me like unexpected blows that forced me awake to the bitter truth. My happiness was slowly being destroyed by a system of values I never agreed with. I realized I could no longer keep living in the invisible trap of control, where my dreams and my identity were seen as unimportant or worse, entirely ignored. The next morning, under the pale light of dawn streaming gently through the window, I quietly gathered what truly belonged to me, not wealth or material possessions, but all the inner values I had built over the years. Inside that small, elegant handbag, beside the essential personal items, I carefully tucked away the deed to the house, the very house that his family proudly declared as an inseparable part of their legacy. But now, that deed had become a powerful symbol of my independence, a declaration of ownership over the life I had always dreamed of. It stood as proof that I no longer belonged to the suffocating prejudices of others. In that moment, as I stepped out of the familiar house, once filled with bitter memories, loneliness, and endless reproach, a rush of liberation swept through me like a cool breeze, dispelling years of sorrow. I felt each step on the worn path like a clear affirmation. I had chosen to walk away from all the constraints, from the hollow promises of a life pre-scripted by others. That feeling burned brightly in my chest, a mix of joy and anxiety for the uncertain road ahead. But it was this very strength and self-determination that opened the door to the life I had long yearned for, a life where I could finally soar on my own wings. I set off in my old car, a vehicle as resilient as my belief in a new future. Driving down long, winding roads, I didn't look back, not once. I headed straight for Los Angeles, a city where dreams of freedom are carved into every vibrant street, every story of those who refuse to surrender to fate. Along the way, the familiar scenery slowly faded behind me like old paintings, like invitations to a new and transformative journey where the past was no longer a chain, but a lesson shaping my future. Every bridge I crossed, every gust of fresh air whispered a reminder that from this point on, every decision and every step I took would be mine alone. No one, not even family or tradition, would have the power to steer my path again. The sound of the tires rolling over the pavement blended with the fierce rhythm of my heartbeat, as if each pulse confirmed my resolve. I wasn't just reclaiming the legal title to a home they had once tried to control like some sacred heirloom. I was reclaiming the right to live on my own terms. The sorrowful memories, the bitter criticisms, the harsh judgments of the past faded gently with the wind, making space for a vibrant sense of excitement and inner rebirth. This journey wasn't just about moving from point A to point B, it was the embodiment of a rebirth, of a strong woman who dared to rise and break free from the shackles of tradition and control. On those long stretches of road, I allowed myself to relax, to breathe in sync with my heart, to savor every sweet moment of freedom. Every kilometer toward the bustling city of Los Angeles affirmed one thing. I had officially left behind the crumbling remnants of a mold I never chose, and the people who had tried to force me into a version of myself that was never mine. It was truly a dazzling moment of liberation and freedom, when I realized that real life only begins when we dare to step outside our comfort zone and confront the prejudices that once caged us. As the sun began to break through the drifting clouds, I felt a steadfast belief rise within me. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, a journey of freedom and self-affirmation, where no one would ever again stand in the way of my progress. Not long after I closed the door on my old life, like a sudden storm, my husband's family plunged into uncontrollable chaos. The phone rang incessantly. Message after message poured in, demanding that I return the house and come back to the family, as if they still believed that my return would restore everything to how it once was. As if all those years of control and imposition had been nothing more than a passing nightmare. But they never understood that I had already made the decision to cut every toxic tie, that their threats and feigned concern were nothing more than ghosts of the past, powerless against me now. I had entered my moment, my era, and every demand, every plea, was now just a faded echo, drifting away in the vastness of the new freedom that awaited me. Not long after my new life began to regain its rhythm of freedom, another unexpected incident struck, like a catalyst reaffirming my resolve never to turn back. One quiet afternoon, as soft sunlight filtered through the windows of my new apartment, a knock at the door startled me. In the past, I had come to associate that sound with an intrusion into my private space. But this time, I didn't hesitate. When I opened the door, the familiar figure of Sebastian stood before me. He was standing there, eyes clouded, his face a mix of confusion and hesitation, as if years of being immersed in a world of control had only just started to unravel. But this time, I was no longer the timid wife who bowed her head in apology or fled at the first sign of blame. I stood tall, cold, resolute, like a woman who had endured 1,000 trials and finally rediscovered herself after years of imprisonment in the cage of prejudice. Sebastian's presence, while familiar, now appeared to me as a relic of the past, something I had long said goodbye to. He tried to speak, faltering words, a confession of confusion or pain, but they echoed only like the voice of a past I had vowed never to revisit. I said nothing. That silence was not weakness. It was a declaration of strength. I was no longer their puppet. That act of silence, coupled with an unwavering, unblinking gaze, said everything. I had risen. I had reclaimed myself. Looking into Sebastian's eyes, I no longer accepted his hollow justifications for a marriage built on oppression and expectations, where my husband had become nothing more than a shadow of rigid tradition. The efforts of Sebastian's family did not stop at emotional appeals. They escalated into legal warfare, leveraging all their connections and social standing to try and reclaim the house they once proudly proclaimed a family treasure, a symbol of legacy and power passed down through generations. But I was prepared. I had all the legal documentation proving my rightful ownership, and I did not hesitate to hire the best attorneys to stand firm against the storm of lawsuits they stirred up. The months that followed were grueling, a fierce legal battle that slowly drained their resources under the weight of massive litigation costs. Each letter, each official notice, made it increasingly clear that their threats and once powerful influences had lost their grip. Eventually, Sebastian's entire family was forced to abandon their quest to regain the power they once held, power that had withered in the face of the law's impartiality. I had won, not just in court, but on a deeper level. A triumph of spirit, a declaration of my right to live freely and fully as myself, a woman whose dreams and dignity had once been nearly extinguished. Through these events, I came to understand the true strength that lies within, the kind of strength no one can deny when you choose to stand up and fight for yourself. I had begun walking a path of freedom, where every challenge only made me stronger, and every obstacle became just another stone paving the way to the life I had always dreamed of. Now, I live freer than ever. I didn't just walk away from a controlling family. I began building a radiant career in Los Angeles. While they remain entangled in their chaos, I continue my new life with grace and confidence, a life no longer bound by absurd rules or suffocating judgment.